Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining. We're just going to give it another minute or two for a few more people to join, and then we will get started with our excellent speakers today. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started, and I'll keep admitting folks as they join. Thank you all so much for joining us today for our fourth webinar in JCC Association's 8 Guiding Principles on Inclusion webinar series. Our principal today will be Darko, Inclusive Education, and we have 3 wonderful speakers who will be sharing their perspectives on this principle. Before we get started, my name is Sierra Weiss. I am the Access and Inclusion Specialist for JCC Association. I have curly brown hair. I'm wearing dark framed glasses and a teal dress, so you can only see my shoulders. And I'm coming to you today from our JCC Association offices in Manhattan, New York, which is the traditional land of the Munsee Lenape. And unfortunately, Liv Mendelson, my colleague and the Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, and Accessibility IDEA consultant, could not join us today, and she sends her apologies, but she is under the weather and will be rejoining us next month, and looking forward to watching the recording. Just a few notes about our presentation today. As a reminder, closed captioning is available. If you use your toggle at the bottom of the screen, there should be an option to turn on live transcription. And the slides from this conversation, as well as a recording from today, will be shared with everyone who joined, as well as with the entire field after we're done with the presentation. So if you're not able to stay for the whole conversation or have colleagues who you think would benefit from hearing this conversation, please wait on that information. You'll be able to forward it along to anyone who is interested in viewing. And we have 3 wonderful presenters today who I will introduce in a minute. We are going to do Q&A at the end of all 3 presentations. So if you think of any questions as we are listening to our wonderful presentations, please pop them in the chat or write them down, and there will be an opportunity to ask those questions at the end of our hour together. So without waiting any longer, I will introduce our first speaker. Oh, sorry, before I do that, I'm getting ahead of myself. I will read for us the principle that we are going to be focusing on today. Darko, Inclusive Education, building upon Proverbs 22:6, teach children according to their way. JCCs offer inclusive programs that meet the individual learning needs of children, families, and people of all ages. JCCs strive to support and collaborate with program professionals, educators, and families to ensure educational programs are inclusive. And you will see with our panel of presenters today, the different ways in each of their work that they are really being true to this principle, and ways that we hope to inspire all of you to continue in this work and continue to make it grow in each of your roles at your JCCs. So with that, I will bring to spotlight for everyone our first speaker, Meredith Polsky, who founded Matan in 2000 and serves as Matan's National Director of Institutes and Training, as well as a child and family therapist and selective mutism specialist at our Beat Counseling in Bethesda, Maryland. Meredith is a nationally sought-after speaker on Jewish special education. She holds a master's degree in special education from Bank Street College, a master's degree in clinical social work from Columbia University, and a graduate certificate in early intervention from Georgetown University. Meredith is a 2017 Covenant Award recipient and co-author of the award-winning I Have a Question children's book series, Jessica Kingsley Publishers, Helping Children with Special Needs and All Children Grapple with Difficult Topics. Meredith, thank you so much for joining us today. I will hand it over to you to present.
Wonderful. Thank you for having me. It's great to be here with all of you. Hopefully you can see my screen now. I'm going to go ahead and start my slides. So I wanted to give you a little bit of an introduction to myself and what we do at Matan, which is the organization I'm here representing. So I was one of the co-founders of Matan about 22 years ago. I have a background in clinical social work and special education. And I started Matan because of this need I was seeing in the Jewish community, and sort of this gap around our ability as a Jewish community to include, at the time, children. I was really focused on children with special needs and disabilities in the fabric of Jewish life. We started out very much as a direct service organization, so working directly in classrooms and working directly with synagogues and JCC programs. I'm going to jump ahead for a second. And really helping, in a lot of ways, we were creating self-contained programs for children with special needs who didn't have the opportunities that other children had in their congregational schools, JCCs, etc. And we were really working school by school, center by center, child by child, right? Trying to promote this idea of inclusion, which luckily is talked about much more now, right? 22 years ago, this was not like a topic on the tips of everybody's tongue of the Jewish world. Over time, what we discovered was that we were having a really significant impact, but on a really small number of people. And so we decided to sort of change our model to become much more of a training organization, with the idea that if we could really train the people on the front lines of Jewish community like yourselves, then we would see ripple effects throughout the country, which is exactly what has happened. And so go back to the beginning slide. This is our mission as it stands now. And this is really what we wake up every day thinking about, right? This idea, 1 in 5, I'll read it for anybody who needs to hear it. 1 in 5, that's the number of people with disabilities in the United States today. Matan enables Jewish professionals, communities, and families to create and sustain inclusive settings in educational, communal, and spiritual aspects of Jewish life. So as you can see, as our mission morphed and as our work expanded, we started to focus not just on children with special needs and disabilities, but really on people throughout the lifespan, right? So children with disabilities, God willing, become adults with disabilities. And we really wanted to sort of look at inclusion more systemically and making sure that, it wasn't just children that we were thinking about. When we think about disability inclusion at Matan, we are really thinking about anything that might impact an individual's ability to successfully participate in the Jewish community in the ways that would be meaningful to them. So this might include learning disabilities, developmental delays, mental health challenges, physical challenges, right? It's really a wide range. And we work to ensure that whoever wants to participate in the Jewish community has that opportunity. On the screen right now is another quote. Sierra had shared one. This one is from Pirkei Avot. It reads, Ben Azai taught, do not disdain any person, do not underestimate the importance of anything, for there is no person who does not have his hour, and there is no thing without its place in the sun. And this was a really big impetus for my starting Matan all those years ago, because it seemed crazy to me that there were people in the Jewish community who were somehow deciding who could access Jewish life and who couldn't. That just sounded it just sounded wrong to me. And so this is a quote that I think of often, right? That there's no one person to be doing the including versus being included, right? If we're really talking about full inclusion, then we're not deciding sort of who get to be the includers, right? And who's being included. It's really sort of equal access for everybody. Just to share some statistics, currently we know that fully about 20%, 1 in 5 people have a diagnosed disability, a learning disability. 1 in 44 individuals in the United States currently has an autism spectrum disorder. And when we think about, if we think about just children, right? And obviously we think about much more than that, but if we think about just children, there are minimally 200,000 students in the Jewish community who are looking to access Jewish education and may not have the opportunity because of special needs or disabilities. So like I said, we currently focus on training. And when I was thinking about this, this workshop, this brief presentation, I was thinking about the idea that you are all coming probably from different parts of the JCC world, right? You're not necessarily all classroom educators. You're not necessarily all, after school educators, and you're not necessarily all program directors, whatever the case may be. I imagine that there's a wide range of JCC professionals here in this Zoom room, if you will. And so I thought that I would try to share things that we think about when we're doing our trainings, and also when we offer community consultations, which I won't go into full detail, but we work with either whole communities or whole organizations to really do a deep dive into what is and is not happening when it comes to disability inclusion, and produce a wide range of recommendations in order to advance disability inclusion in that area. So I already talked about what we think of at Matan when we think of inclusion. And this may vary from organization to organization. It also may vary from person to person. Different people have different ideas of what inclusion looks like to them. The way I think of it is this: inclusion is an attitude and approach that ensures every person, regardless of ability or background, can meaningfully participate in all aspects of Jewish life, right? We're past the point where we would have kids in a classroom who aren't getting anything out of it, but it's okay because they're there, right? We're past the point where where we can say that is meaningfully participating and successful inclusion. When I think about special needs programs versus inclusive Jewish community centers, I think about some of these graphics, right? So you can see, sorry, I'm having trouble seeing my screen with all the waiting room pop-ups. So you can see, right, what exclusion looks like, which hopefully none of our JCCs at this point are experiencing. And then there's integration, which I think of as sort of a special needs program within a program, right? So maybe a special class that you have for individuals with disabilities, maybe a vocational class you have for individuals with disabilities, right? So they're in your building, they're part of the JCC, they have their own services that they're accessing. And then we think about full inclusion, right? As everything just sort of seamlessly, although we know it's not quite seamless, but seamlessly working together to help people be included in whatever aspect they want to be included in. And you'll find people with disabilities, families of people with disabilities, may want different things, right? So it's not that one is necessarily better than the other. As I'll talk about in a moment, it's really about getting to know people and asking questions to know what type of inclusion will work best for them and what they're looking for. So when I think about JCCs as a whole, a lot of you come from, larger JCCs. It's sort of almost like a whole city unto itself, lots of different departments, lots of different types of programs, whether it's classrooms for young children, whether it's, a social skills class for young adults, whether it's a vocational program, you have, probably athletics, right? And gyms and pools and all of these things. And so it's really a big system to think about. And what I think, like, if I could make one point that you remember after this session, it would be that inclusion can't be relegated to one person or one program, right? If we're thinking specifically about inclusive JCCs, we have to make sure that we're really thinking about this across the whole system. So some bullet points you'll see up on the screen right now. An inclusive JCC is offering the same opportunities for people with and without disabilities. It's welcoming everyone, right? It's emphasizing cooperation. It's asking those questions, seeking to understand and accommodate differences. Said a different way, I would say, starting from yes instead of no, right? When somebody comes to you with something that might feel out of the box, right? A lot of us, our first tendency is to say, no, we don't do that, right? But what if we said yes, and let's figure out how to do that? Having facilities and areas that are accessible and easy to use by everyone, providing a safe and socially comfortable environment for all, teaching respect, understanding, and dignity to people of all abilities, embracing changes that facilitate full participation, fostering a sense of belonging as a respected and valued peer, and honoring the intrinsic value of each person's life. And we can do this in different ways, right? So one of the simplest things, do you have, if you have photographs around your building, do they represent the full range of people that you're aiming to serve within your JCC? Do you have signs that make it clear where people should go for what, or where they should go, or who they should talk to if they do need accommodations or modifications or are having trouble in any way? Model inclusive behavior and leading by example. So we want to really communicate with our clients, right? Whether it's the person who answers the phone for membership, or the security guard at the front of the building, or the receptionist at the front desk. We want to help all of these people understand what our goals are when it comes to inclusion. We want to ask questions. We want to accentuate strengths. And we want to believe that everyone at your center is responsible for inclusion, right? Again, it can't fall to one person who works in a separate inclusion department. It's great to have that person, don't get me wrong. But if we want to see inclusion throughout the system, throughout the JCC, then we need to make sure that it's not relegated to just one part of it. So questions to think about when you're thinking about disability inclusion, right? We think about physical accessibility. And again, like, this is my number one thing. Do you provide inclusion training for all staff, right? Every single person, not just the people who are teaching in the classrooms, right? Who maybe have children with special needs or disabilities, but do people know how you as a JCC want to welcome people, right? Do people who are really on those front lines, right? The people who get those first calls, the people who are the first point of contact at your JCC, do they understand what your mission is, what your vision is when it comes to inclusion? And do they understand what to do with that mission and vision? What are your hiring practices as they relate to inclusion? Think about the percentage of people on your staff that have a disability. Those are really important people to hire. They bring, their own expertise in whatever area of JCC life they bring, and they bring lived personal experience to help you think about how to be more inclusive. What do users see, right? That's sort of goes back to the photographs on the wall, right? As one example, what's on your website, what's in your print materials, what do they see around the JCC that gives them any indication that you aim to be as inclusive as possible? Is there, okay, this is another really important one. Who do people contact, right? If they need a modification or accommodation, you could have a heart of gold. You could have every single inclusive intention in the world, but if nobody knows that, then they're not going to come. They're going to assume that you're going to be another no within the Jewish community, right? So we want to make sure there is a point person with contact information on every single thing we send out, right? Making sure that we're sending the message that we aim to be inclusive, right? we aim for this program to be inclusive of all people. Contact this person at this email, this phone number, either to learn more or to talk about what you might need to participate. Transparency of inclusion goals, right? Is it on your website? Is it in print materials? Do you have an inclusion statement? And are there protocols in place for different departments to communicate with one another, right? And that includes, the kids in the early childhood program who maybe go on to the after school program, but it also includes, the adult ed department talking to the fitness department, right? And thinking about how to meet the needs of all individuals. And of course, there are always organizations in your own backyard, in your own area, who can serve as support and experts in this field as well. So I think I'm exactly on time. So we're not going to do this obviously together because time doesn't permit, but I hope that you'll think about just some of the things that maybe I presented today. And I know I talk a little bit fast and you can review the slides later. And think about what you personally, in your current role at your JCC, what could be a short-term goal and what could be a long-term goal for being part of a solution of creating greater inclusive opportunities. On this last slide, which I know you'll get and be able to access, I just listed some Matan resources. Most of them are free. So if you are interested in, different kinds of materials or learning different things about disability inclusion in the Jewish community, we hope you will access those. And again, I hope in this just short amount of time, I spoke a little bit towards each of the different roles that you play, because I really do consider all of that inclusive education, right? Sometimes that means a classroom, sometimes that means an after school program, sometimes it means something else, right? Sometimes it means that people are coming to the JCC because that's where they're practicing their social interactions, right? Or their vocational skills or whatever it may be. So to me, it's all education. And it's, Alpi Darko, right? Like how we make sure that every person is successfully included. So thank you.
Meredith, thank you so much for sharing that. And if anyone has questions for Meredith that you have top of mind right now, feel free to put them in the chat or jot them down, and we'll have an opportunity to be in conversation more with Meredith at the end of our hour together. So I'm going to bring Tamar to the spotlight, pull my presentation back up. Give me 1 second. Oops. Okay, so Tamar Davis. As a person born with a disability and a parent of a child with a disability, Tamar is keenly aware of the ongoing need for advocacy and accessibility for disability inclusion and education for children and families in the global Jewish community. In August 2020, Tamar became CEO of Gateway's Access to Jewish Education after having served as the Chief Development Officer for the Jewish Community Relations Council, JCRC, of Greater Boston. Before that, Tamar had worked for over a decade at Hadassah, the Women's Zionist Organization of America, and Hadassah International, most recently as Hadassah's National Director of Annual Giving. Tamar is an active volunteer in the Greater Boston Jewish community, having previously served as a member of Gateway's Board of Trustees and as the board chair of the Young Israel of Brookline. When she lived in Manhattan, Tamar was a vice president of Congregation Ohab Tzedek, a member of JNF Futures Leadership Ring, and a co-founder of ViZion, a growing network of professionals working for Jewish, Israel, and Zionist-related nonprofits, now managed by the American Zionist Movement. Tamar is a Bachelor of Science in Marketing from Yeshiva University's Sims School of Business, a proud stepmother and mother to 5 children. Tamar and her husband, Alan Galper, live in Brookline, Massachusetts. And I'll just add on a personal note before I hand it over to Tamar. When I was in high school, I volunteered at Gateways for 4 years, and it really was where I got my start and my passion for this work and for disability inclusion. So I owe so much to Gateways, and Tamar wasn't there at the time that I was, but I feel so fortunate to have stayed connected to such an incredible organization, and so pleased to see such wonderful leadership continue since I've left the Boston area. So Tamar, I'm so glad to have you on screen with us, and I'll pass it to you.
Thank you so much, Sierra. I'm so happy to be here. I'm very grateful to you and to the JCCs of North America for inviting me. And Meredith, it's so wonderful to be here with you and hearing the amazing and critical work that Matan does. And Caitlin, I'm looking forward to getting to know you in a few minutes as well. And for all of you, I'm just looking forward to getting to know you, whether you're listening live or you're listening to the recorded version from wherever you are across the country. I'm going to share my screen for just a brief moment, and I'm only going to share for a couple of slides. So we mentioned gateways, access to Jewish education. This is what we do. We provide high quality special education services, expertise, and support to enable students with diverse learning needs to succeed in Jewish educational setting and participate meaningfully in Jewish life. And so we really think about what every child can, and this is obviously all shades of what Meredith was talking about, that at Gateway, we believe every child can discover the joy of life, of Jewish life, of Jewish learning. We're making sure that every child gains a lifelong community and the ability to participate meaningfully in Jewish life and learning. I just want to pause for a moment because we do have 40 something people on here right now on the live Zoom. And I did want to have just a quick brainstorm, if you feel comfortable writing in the chat. What does that word inclusion mean to you? We heard Meredith's definition, which I also firmly believe in, but how do we see inclusion in action? That's really what I would love to hear from you in the chat. Like, what are you proud of in your JCC or in your personal life, if you affiliate with a synagogue or another religious entity, or in your school? Where have you seen inclusion in action? And if you could just take a couple of minutes to write in the chat. And while you're doing that, I'm just going to share a little bit about myself, my own personal story, and how I, just being a person with a disability, a parent of a child with a disability, and how I came to be in this role as CEO of Gateway. So please do write in the chat. I see some are starting to pop up. So just to share a little bit about myself, more than what the bio said in terms of how it relates to what we're talking about here. I was born in Richmond, Virginia. You can't tell from the Southern Belle accent, but I was born in Richmond, where I was diagnosed with severe hearing loss. I was fitted with hearing aids at the advanced age of 2. Nowadays, screening would happen at birth, but when I was born, it wasn't discovered until I was 2 years old, and I was fitted with hearing aids. I cannot hear without them. And my parents were really laser focused on making sure I could have a Jewish education. For them, that meant getting me into a Jewish day school without compromising any of my hearing or speech development. So for the first few years of my life in Richmond, I attended a special public school for the hearing impaired and deaf. Then when I was 5, we moved to Florida. This is where I grew up, and shout out in the chat if you're from Florida. It was in Florida that my parents were able to mainstream me into a Jewish day school and supplement with the services I needed in order to access the curriculum from the public school, from wherever offsite services that I needed. So it was inclusion, but not quite inclusion. And there was a lot of moving pieces that at the time were really a credit to my mother, who was not working outside of the home at that point in her life, and was able to do this for me and for my sister, who also has the same disability. Now I'm living in the Boston area. Go Celtics if you're watching the tournament, the final, with my husband, his 3 older children, and our 2 little ones, 3 and 5. And so it's my 5-year-old. When he was born 5 years ago, we had a Brit Milah, a circumcision ceremony for him. One of the things we did was place him on that Kisei Eliyahu, the Elijah chair, and recite a prayer. And there's a phrase that I just want to share in the context of this moment that really resonates with me, especially now that I'm in this particular professional role. Shalom Rav le'ohavei Toratecha ve'ein lamo michshol. Those who love your Torah have abounding peace, and there is no stumbling for them. Michshol is stumbling. And this is a phrase that embodies gateways to me. It embodies the JCCs to me. It embodies what Matan is doing to me. We cherish our Jewish tradition. We are so proud of our Jewish heritage. We prioritize Jewish education for our community's children. And looking at all of the faces here, I know that we all so firmly believe There should be no stumbling block, no barriers to Jewish education, no barrier to being part of the fabric of Jewish life, no matter what our ability. So now this movement for inclusion, which Meredith is totally right, 22 years ago, it was not on the tip of people's tongue, but now it really is. It's not just an idea, it's a reality. We are committed to sustaining and growing this movement through gateways and through all our partners here. So now I want to go to the chat and see what you've shared about what that word inclusion really means and build on what we've shared. So I'm looking at the chat now. Oh my gosh, I see so many. And Sierra, I hope that you'll share some of the chat with us afterwards. I want to say the fullness of acceptance, but Salam Elohim, absolutely, we are made in God's image and community to have access to all and all voices, adding to our stronger or more vibrant collective voice. Kathy, I love that. Jacob, what you wrote. And I'm seeing finding more ways for staff and volunteers to have a full and complete role that works for them. How do we meet people where they are? How are we supporting people and how they can be full participants? And being intentional and thoughtful in our accommodation and modifying how we can be more inclusive and include others who wouldn't otherwise be able to participate. And being able to access and participate all programs JCC offered. I'm just seeing a lot of how we can think about accommodating everyone's needs. So clearly, Meredith, they heard what you said. They were already thinking about it. This is so great, and I love it. And keep writing the chat. And I love the shout outs from Miami. Hi, Gary, and Mara from Fort Lauderdale. We'll chat more. I'm from the Hollywood, Fort Lauderdale area myself. And so what I think about also is being warm and welcoming is certainly a big part of inclusion, but inclusion also means providing people with the tools they need in order to come and actively participate. And inclusion means ensuring that people are active and valued participants, not just kind of sitting in the back row. Yes, we have people who have disabilities here, but how are they present? Are they feeling a sense of belonging, or is it, I don't want to say an afterthought, but is it, how are we thinking about intentionally including, as someone wrote in the chat? Another thing I want to propose to you also is about having a choice, that there are different options for children. We work with children and teens, but children and teens with disabilities, the diverse learning needs, you heard the statistics from Meredith, and the mental health challenges also. And so some options might be for children who are in Jewish day schools and need that extra help, like myself as a child, to succeed in the classroom, which we do in Gateway by having therapists in day schools in the Boston area. Currently, we serve over 135 students in about 10 of the area, 14 area day schools. Other option might be about enrolling in a program such as our Sunday or B'nai Mitzvah program, which we do in person, but we also offer B'nai Mitzvah learning remotely as well, where the goal is for kids with a range of disabilities, complex or otherwise, to have a Jewish curriculum that they can access and be able to participate, not just in this setting, but to be able to be in their synagogue setting and to have their activities there and be part of have a bar bat mitzvah. We're celebrating our 96th B'nai Mitzvah this Shabbat, and we're thrilled about that. It's such a testament to the work of not just what Gateways does, but the community involvement, the partners we have. We also provide support through professional development and consultation for educators in all types of educational settings, from day school to religious and supplemental school and early learning centers, like starting with children at a very early age. And we're even starting to move into how can we support those in camp settings as well, because Jewish educational settings are everywhere, formal and informal. And so we work with those in the greater Boston area, but we also support a variety of different schools and ELCs, and even a Jewish children museum in Florida, where, so outside of the Boston area, where we've been able to expand, because one great thing about COVID is people have become more comfortable with Zoom. So that has definitely enhanced our ability to keep pushing that, the movement of inclusion forward. And so this summer with camps, and this is something certainly with JCCs you might want to consider, we're piloting some of our offerings to camp to help with training teams. And you heard Sierra is a product of our teen volunteer program. So we are taking that expertise to use toward helping other organizations and JCC to train your teenage counselors on basic strategies and support to prevent and address challenging behavior in a camp setting, as well as having consultation available throughout the summer if there are just campers struggling to engage in that expected behavior. And then in the last few years, well before COVID hit even, we've been working with children with mental health concerns because there is such a rising need. And we're seeing that as an all-time high right now, whether academically or socially or both, they struggle in these Jewish educational settings. And we've been called even more to help meet those challenges. So like I said, it's a partnership. It's partnership with community leaders, with educators, directors, JCCs, family, whether in our school, JCCs, or camps, or our synagogue, any communal space that we find ourselves in. And we need to build more of those partnerships and more of those supports and how we think about inclusion, because these are our children and our children's children, and they're so precious, every single one of us, of these children. And if we don't have them with us, then the whole community is lacking because we don't have every single person engaged and involved. And we lose families to our community if we don't engage the child in our activities. So that's really my overarching vision for Gateway, to keep advancing that movement for inclusion and engaging more partners such as yourself in this effort together. And so just to segue, I know that we're going to have a question portion toward the end, and I don't want to rehash some of what Meredith has said so beautifully about some of these components of inclusion, but I think just in terms of some of the questions that she has shared, some of the questions that I think about when having this open conversation about what inclusion really means to us in our specific role of how we interact with our program, with children, with whatever setting we're in, and what are the things that you're struggling with as you seek to ensure that your program and spaces are inclusive. So like Meredith had mentioned about where does it say it on your website about supporting accessibility and inclusivity. And I would say, Meredith, you had mentioned about how can families or people with disabilities reach out? Who do they know to contact? But I would even say if you know of a family or person with a disability, contact them when you have a program coming up. Be proactive in your outreach to make sure they know what is being done to accommodate disabilities, and to ask even, like, I'm a person with a hearing disability, but I don't sign myself. So would it be helpful to just assume and have an ASL interpreter at an event? It would be more helpful to ensure that there's some reserved seating toward the front, or that there's captioning available at your event, at a live event. And thinking about your physical spaces as well in terms of accessibility, and also what your virtual offerings are. Sierra says she had live captioning here, and making sure you're sending materials ahead of time for people who need time to process information, or who use an audio reader for people with low vision or blindness to be able to read what's being shown on the screen ahead of time. Thinking about the kind of formal training and support you're providing for your professional staff and lay leaders. There are so many different things to think about. And then I'll just conclude with this last question is, what are you doing to plan for the future? Because I'm sure that many JCCs were in the midst of making changes to increase accessibility, to become more inclusive when COVID hit. And now that we're finally really, are we in the we're in the semi-post-COVID stage? What phase are we really in? We never really know, but we are out there. We're certainly more active and in person. And while cost is more of an issue than ever, as we all know in the nonprofit world, it is so important for communities to continue making inclusion a priority when thinking about what your next move is in your planning for the future. And I will add also that Gateways is very proud and happy to be housed. We rent from the JCC of Greater Boston. That is our home. We have a close relationship with the JCC, and we see a lot of what goes on, and we've been talking more about that partnership and what that can look like. And one of the things that the JCC COO has talked with us about moving into these next few months is they're rethinking some of their spaces. what's the experience of our Gateways families when they come in through the lobby, and thinking about how does that experience feel to them walking through? Are they feeling included, or are they feeling like, oh, this is just a separate track? That graphic that Meredith has shown about exclusion, and then like, how do we get the circle to be one where everyone, all the dots are really in that circle? So I'll conclude with that note, and I think I am on time. And Sierra, I'll hand it back over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Tamar, for that really beautiful presentation. And really, Meredith and Tamar, thank you both for sharing your perspectives and your expertise in the field is so appreciated and gives us such helpful tools and ideas as we each take it into the JCC space. And with that, I'm very excited to bring now to the screen someone from the JCCs, and it's been a real honor for us to have opportunities to highlight JCCs that are really excelling and great examples of inclusive practice in what they're already doing. So I'm really excited to welcome Caitlin McGahee, who is the lead teacher for infants at Beth Emmet. She has been teaching with the JCC for 8 years, working with all age groups, but primarily infants. Although her educational background is in social work, Caitlin was drawn to working with younger children in a teaching role. While working for some time at Chicago Public Schools doing early intervention, she began to mesh social work and teaching roles and still considers both roles now as a full-time teacher. Caitlin loves working with infants for many reasons beyond their adorable nature. She enjoys experiencing the vast changes in growth and development that take place during the first year or so of life. So Caitlin, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing some of that practical application of our guiding principle that we are focusing on today in what you'll share with us.
Great, thank you so much for that introduction. And it was great to hear from both Tamar and Meredith. This is my first time ever speaking and presenting like this. So it was great to hear from them first. And hopefully you all can bear with me a little bit as I'm a bit nervous. So I am from Beth Emmet, and we're located like right outside of Chicago. And for us, inclusion, so first of all, I'll point out my cute students here. So we have an age range. They started about 5 months old, and now, at the beginning of the year, and now go all the way up to about 22 months old by the time they leave our room. So it's a pretty wide range. Inclusion for us is really, in early childhood, is really a collaborative effort between the parents and the teachers, medical professionals that we get our guidance from, the director of our center, our social service team, and then outside therapists that we're working with that come to our school and work with our children. So we're always looking at the children's individual needs. But this year in particular, we did have a very diverse group of students coming in. We were made aware of a few medical conditions that several of our children had before the year started. We have a child that had a bit of like a traumatic birth situation and had some brain damage from that. And another child that has a medical condition called hemophilia. So it's a blood clotting disorder. So we were given a lot of precautions with these children to really be cautious about falling, potential head injury. And with this age of kids, when they're just learning to walk, that was making us all a bit anxious initially because they are falling really nonstop when they're learning to walk and wanting to climb all over everything. So we met with someone from Lurie's Children's Hospital here that gave us a lot of great information for protocols, really, if there was ever an emergency situation. But we sort of took that, and initially, with our anxieties, we sort of went around our room setting things up. We were putting a lot of foam padding on edges of anything that seemed that they could fall and get hurt. We didn't have any type of gross motor climbing area, but that didn't last very long. We've continuously changed our room probably at least 10 times by now, rearranging and adding and taking away things. You can see in some of these photos here, we've added sort of an intentional climbing area at this point for the children to look out the window, because that was something that we noticed. They just constantly wanted to see what was going on outside, watch, the garbage trucks coming in, see the other children playing on the playground, watch, to see if their parents were pulling in the parking lot there. And so we were spending a lot of time holding the children up when the other ones were becoming impatient. It wasn't their turn yet to be held, and really just still at that point of being fearful of an injury taking place. But we really noticed, in particular with these students who we were most concerned about, that when they were falling, it was like they knew internally that they had to be a bit more cautious, and we were noticing that they were cradling almost their own fall. And that really, helped us to relax a little bit of not, realizing we shouldn't be making these assumptions that, and holding them back in a way that they're not capable of, doing exactly the same thing that all of the other children are wanting to do. So yeah, we created this vantage point for them. It did feel like, we were taking a risk, but, and also, there was some concern, throughout from the beginning of the year with the parents, but that just took a lot of partnering with them and building trust, really from the beginning of the year. Due to COVID, like our family still cannot enter our building. But what that's actually caused, I always kind of try to look for some silver linings of COVID, but we are spending a much greater deal of time out, during the pickup and the drop-offs, sometimes out there speaking with families for 20 to 30 minutes. At a time, and then much more phone calls and email communication than I've really ever experienced before. So I would almost say that there has been like far more communication this year with our families than I've really had before. And that has really been great as far as the parents trusting us and just having that communication piece as we move forward throughout the year. So also at the beginning of our year, the families will all fill out a ages and stages questionnaire. And we had almost 100% participation from our families this year of filling this out. It's a tool that we use to see if their child might qualify for different services, and a few of our children did. So that would require them to then go have an evaluation. And we actually had a lot of follow-up with families going through with this and having their evaluation and then starting services. It's more follow through than I've really ever seen before, but also this was probably the most like diverse group of students that I've had in a classroom together. So some things that were really helpful for me, as a teacher, like this was the most looped in from the beginning of that process that I've really ever felt. So from the very initial stages of seeing their ASQ, knowing when the evaluation was going to take place, having the meeting with the family about that evaluation. I've never been a part of that process before. I'm normally looped in at the point of, someone is going to be coming and services are going to be starting in your classroom. So this was extremely helpful for me, as I know their individual schedules for our room, and I was just able to suggest different times that I know would work best for each student, or even just personality traits of a student. Some of them are more social and would be happy to meet a new person coming in for therapy, and other students are going to be extremely anxious about that. So being able to kind of help transition that process. And it's really been with that, like a lot of balance and flexibility, because on a day-to-day basis, sometimes students may be okay with leaving and getting services, and other days, they may not, or halfway through a session even. So primarily the services that our students are getting as of now, we have a few getting speech, OT, and also physical therapy. And we have definitely learned a lot from the therapists. So I really do enjoy the time that they have spent like in our classroom rather than taking the child out. But I do also understand, it can be a bit distracting at times, with 12 other kids in the classroom. But some of the things that have been suggested to us is, because they do love that area with the phone blocks by the window, is just doing things like pulling those away so that we know they're going to bring them there, so that they can build that gross motor development by pushing them right back to their desired spot. And then with the speech, that has been really helpful. In a lot of the trainings I've had as a teacher, I feel like it is often catered to older students, and infant, age students are sometimes left out of the conversation with that. And so as an educator, it's always been, in early childhood, it's always been drilled into me to use open-ended questions. And it was explained to me by the speech therapist that really doesn't make sense. And and I can completely see why, because with infants, where we can't expect that they're going to, answer questions for us. And it's really not geared in a way to help them develop speech. So that was a really helpful piece. But in general, it's really just, I think, what has made this year feel really, really successful to me, in watching all of these children's progression, and how much really everything has, how much we've relaxed and became more inclusive as a teaching team, is just really sort of this openness of hearing from all of the other professionals, and openness to meet the parents at their level of expertise, and really just observing the capabilities of the children, and not making assumptions of what they should and should not be participating in.
Thank you so much, Caitlin, for sharing these insights from your classroom. It's really, in addition to the cute photos of the kids, it's very interesting to learn about your experiences and perspectives, and get this real practical understanding of this principle. So with that, I'm going to bring Meredith and Tamar back to the spotlight. Okay. And if anyone has questions, and Caitlin, you could take a look at the chat, because there were a few questions for you that I think were answered, but just for you to see, and much praise for your presentation. So you should feel good about that first go. And if anyone has questions, please post them in the chat or raise your hand or just go ahead and unmute. But I'll just, as you're doing that, note something that really I noticed as a theme across these three very different perspectives on inclusive education, but something really important of this focus on communication and support and community building that is so clearly a central theme to creating inclusive spaces, and particularly inclusive education, of communicating with families and children to make sure that their needs are being met, and preemptively asking what their needs are instead of waiting until there's a barrier or a roadblock. And I feel like that is so central to the work that we're all doing at JCCs, of building community and trying to create space where everyone can feel comfortable and welcome. So I just wanted to highlight that theme that I noticed across our three presenters. And thank you all again for joining.
Yeah, if I could just make a comment, I just, in terms of what Caitlin, what you said about not presuming confidence, like not assuming that there's a no in there, and I think that's something critical that underpins the way we should be approaching all of this. That that children are capable, and we just have to figure out how to accommodate and let those capabilities shine. And then the other thing that really resonated with me also was what you said about becoming more relaxed about what this is, and really working with one another with professionals on hand. And I can tell you that as a parent, when I wasn't in the gateway space or in this space professionally, and I was bringing my son was diagnosed at 7 months with his disabilities and delays, and he was in a daycare. I had a full-time job, and I had to work with early intervention therapists coming into the daycare, and we ended up switching daycare because it was just not a place that was working with like all the therapists wanted to do was work with the teachers and the administration, and it was not an inclusive space. And we switched and when I looked for a new space, knowing now what my child needed, and I was so open about the conversation, and it was just an entirely different experience, and I felt included. Not just my child, but me. I felt included also in the conversation. And I think that's so critical when I think about everyone on this call and what we think about and how we want to be engaged in this work. And now he's in kindergarten, and he's doing, he's making his own progress at his own pace. But it's amazing to see how those first few years can really set a kid up for success in so many ways. And what that experience for parents does also, when you think about their experiences those first few years. Just looking, Sierra, are there any other questions in the chat that any of us might have missed?
I was just thinking, this is Kathy Palmer from JCC Association, and thank you all so much. What an incredible day of presentations. I'm feeling full and hopeful in so many ways. But I just want to add to what you just mentioned there, Tamar, about those inclusive conversations, those practices over time need to happen with the other educators as well, all the educators together. We need to really be acting as a community that is trying to build the community that aligns with our values over time, and not necessarily have the program already built and then we go there and it's already perfect. We only are as good as the new voices that are joining us and telling us what our needs are and who we are. Inclusion is over a minute later if you've stopped listening to all the voices all around you. So I really think that we need to keep those conversations going with everybody, to be a responsive community and include everybody in those conversations.
Not be afraid of those conversations. I think fear is such a barrier. Even the words we use, sometimes we're afraid to say the wrong words when we talk about disability. Disability is not a forbidden word. Developmental delays are not scary words. We need to just talk about it, own it. We need to be very tactical and logistical about how we're going to support, and we can't be afraid of using the words. And we'll learn together. Language is something that holds us back in this as well. And we can't be afraid. We can't be afraid to ask. And not knowing is okay, really okay.
I think you just hit the nail on the head of really something we've been thinking about in this entire series of feeling comfortable in these uncomfortable spaces and discussions, and knowing we might make mistakes, and to learn along the way, and to just be open to understanding new perspectives and new ways of doing our work, and talking about our work and talking about being inclusive communities. And I really want to thank the three of you, Meredith, Tamar, and Caitlin, and all of you on screen with us today for participating and joining in this conversation. And I just also want to note that I threw in the chat the links to Matan and Gateways, which I highly recommend everyone take a look at. There are excellent, excellent resources on both websites that you can take a look at. And I will also make sure to include that in the follow-up to this conversation today. So thank you all for once again joining for the webinar series, and we look forward to continuing this conversation next month.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Ciara. Bye, everyone.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thank you.